Member from Edmonton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to rise in support of Bill 20, a bill I believe that marks a historic step forward for our province. You know, we've heard a lot of criticism since the introduction of our climate leadership plan. I'd just like to make one thing clear. A carbon levy is good public policy. As noted by Dr. Andrew Leach, who chaired our climate change advisory panel, a wide consensus of economists around the world support implementing a price on carbon. In the words of Canada's Eco-Fiscal Commission, a non-partisan commission of economists whose advisory board includes such radical socialists as Preston Manning, former Alberta Finance Minister Jim Dinning, economist Jack Mintz, who members opposite have called on for his non-partisan expertise, they're all part of this group. And they state, carbon pricing makes economic sense for Canadian provinces. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest possible cost, helps position Canada to better compete in carbon-constrained international markets by sparking low-carbon innovation and by representing a transparent and credible climate policy, and one known to be effective that may help to secure market access for our abundant and valuable natural resources. There is no argument. All experts agree. Placing a price on carbon is the best way to reduce emissions. Now, it's important to note that in doing so, it is not the imposition of a new cost. It's the removal of a subsidy. For years, economies around the world have failed to take into account the environmental and health impacts of business operations. The costs generated by these activities have instead been borne by all orders of government, who've simply absorbed the direct and indirect costs generated by the burning of fossil fuels. So the costs realized through a price on carbon are not new ones that are being imposed from outside the economic system. They're costs that have always been there. The price on carbon simply makes them explicit and transparent as part of the cost of consumption. This provides an economic incentive to reduce those same costs by reducing the amount of carbon produced. So I apologize for the basic carbon tax 101, Mr. Speaker, but it seems to be something that's needed for some members of this House. Currently, there's about 40 countries and over 20 states, cities, and regions that have all stepped up to put a price on carbon. And now with this bill, Alberta will lead Canada in joining this forward-thinking coalition. Our climate leadership plan was put together based on the advice provided by Dr. Andrew Leach and our climate change advisory panel. It has the support of industry, environmental advocates, municipal and federal partners, economists, health professionals, and investors. And as recommended by economists, every dollar that is raised through this levy will be fully recycled. Now, I was surprised earlier today to hear the member for Calgary Elbow state that he had never heard the term revenue recycling. A quick Google search shows that this is in fact a common term that's used when discussing how government should make use of the funds raised through carbon pricing. Canada's Eco-Fiscal Commission released a report specifically on this issue entitled Choose Wisely, Options and Trade-offs in Recycling Carbon Pricing Revenues. They make 4 recommendations on how governments should recycle carbon revenues. First, they suggest that government should use revenue recycling to address fairness and competitiveness concerns surrounding carbon pricing. Secondly, they suggest that government should clearly define their objectives for revenue recycling. What is it that they intend to do? What purposes do they intend to achieve? Third, they recommend that government should use a range of approaches when recycling revenue. They feel that it's important that we have a variety of options and utilize many different levers to address the various issues that surround the issue both of climate change and the effects of putting a price on carbon. They note that each approach comes with particular strengths and weaknesses, and that no one approach on its own can meet or address all of the important factors involved, which include things like maintaining household fairness, supporting business competitiveness, and also improving economic and environmental performance. So in this, they note that governments have 6 main options for how they recycle carbon revenues. Firstly, that being direct rebates to households and consumers. Secondly, reductions in personal and corporate income tax. Third, investments in low-carbon technology. Fourth, investments in infrastructure. Fifth, reduction of public debt. And then lastly, transitional support to industry. Now, interestingly, in this report, they actually go through and they look at various provinces across Canada and they make some recommendations on how those different options should be prioritized. In the province of Alberta, they placed a high priority on household transfers, on investments in low-carbon technology, and on transitional support to industry. They placed a low priority on cuts to personal and corporate income tax, perhaps recognizing that Alberta, of course, still remains the lowest tax jurisdiction in Canada. Thank you. A tradition we're proud to continue. And they also place a low priority on reduction of public debt. They place a moderate priority on investments in infrastructure. And lastly, then, they recommend that all revenue recycling priorities should be monitored and adjusted over time. Mr. Speaker, our plan meets all of these criteria. It calls for us to recycle $6.2 billion in revenues directly back into the economy through several channels and clearly outlines our objectives in doing so. Our plan calls for us to recycle $6.2 billion back into the economy. We're investing $3.4 billion in large-scale renewable energy, bioenergy, and technology. This, Mr. Speaker, has been noted by my colleagues ahead of me, will help create jobs in the province of Alberta, while moving us to a more secure energy system that will cause less problems and difficulties in terms of health. We're investing $2.2 billion in green infrastructure like transit, and we're investing an additional $645 million in Energy Efficiency Alberta. At long last, Mr. Speaker, as has been noted by some of the members ahead of me, we are finally bringing an energy efficiency program to the province of Alberta. And Mr. Speaker, on that point, I'd like to note that, I hear members opposite that are expressing all kinds of concerns about the effects this may have on businesses, the effects it may have on nonprofit groups and communities, on our schools, our hospitals. Mr. Speaker, we're taking bold action. Alberta is a province that's known for bold action. We are a province of innovators. We are a province of people who step up and face a challenge. Through Energy Efficiency Alberta, we will be standing alongside all of our community partners. We're not abandoning them, Mr. Speaker. We are going to work with them to help them find the efficiencies that members of the opposition seem to believe are everywhere to be found, except when it comes to climate change or with trying to reduce the use of carbon. We will work with our partners in communities. We will work with them. We will help them. We will provide programs that support them to help achieve the energy efficiency that we need and that will assist them ultimately, Mr. Speaker, to reduce their costs and to pay less than they currently pay. With that, Mr. Speaker, I think we're going to have more opportunity to further this debate. I'd like at this point then to make a motion to adjourn.